Hey Goblin, you've been really practicing those war drums.
I'll bring the generic goblin noise!
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. I also want to let you know that Flipside Gaming will be giving away a box of War of the Sparks. From April 1st through May 6th, any order that's over $10 or more will get you entered to win. One entry per person, so good luck and have fun. I'd also like to announce my new Canadian-based sponsor, Multizone.ca. You can also use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, one word, to get 10% off orders of singles. And to coincide with the announcement, today's game was actually filmed at Multizone, which is one of the shops we'll be playing at, and it's based in Gatineau, Quebec. We have one old friend and 3 new faces joining us for this game. First up, we have Joel playing his Titania deck, and he keeps a Forest, City of Traders, Windswept Heath, Chrome Mox, Jiraga Treespeaker, Ramunap Excavator, and Realms Uncharted. Next up is Nick playing his Gyrus deck, keeping a Forest, Greater Good, Dakmor Salvage, Dark Dweller Oracle, Farhaven Elf, Overgrown Tomb, and a Tranquil Thicket. We have Max, who's playing Vaevictus, and he keeps Swiftfoot Boots, 3 Forests, Myriad Landscape, Homeward Path, and a Taiga. And last but not least, we have Jameson playing his Skithiryx deck, keeping a Necromantic Selection, Mutilate, Whispersilk Cloak, Temple the False God, and 3 Swamps. Joel wins the die roll, and he starts us off. Joel plays a tapped Havenwood Battleground, and he casts a Chrome Mox, exiling Realms Uncharted to the imprint trigger. He then taps the Mox for 1 green, and he casts a Jiraga Treespeaker, passing to Nick. Nick plays a Blooming Marsh untapped, and passes. Max plays a Foily Myriad Landscape, passing. Jameson plays a Swamp, and passes back to Joel. Joel plays a City of Traders, and sacrifices his Havenwood for 2 green. He taps the rest of his mana, and is able to cast turn 2 Titania, who enters and brings back the tapped Havenwood. Moving to combat, the Jiraga Treespeaker hits Jameson for 1. At the end of Joel's turn, Nick cycles his Tranquil Thicket to draw a card. Nick plays a tapped Dakmor Salvage, and passes to Max. Max plays a Taiga, and passes. Jameson plays a Swamp, and passes. Joel plays a Windswept Heath, tapping his City of Traders as he has to sacrifice it for a land coming in. He gains a 5/3 elemental token from the land dying, and uses his Chrome Mox and the 2 colors floating to cast a Ramunap Excavator. Joel then loses 1 life as he cracks his Heath to find a Forest, and he gets another 5/3 elemental in the process. Responding to the fetch cracking, Jameson uses Malicious Affliction on Titania. With the spell targeting on the stack, Joel cracks the Havenwood for 2 green and gets another elemental token, and his commander then dies. Joel then uses the floating mana to level up the Treespeaker, and taps the Treespeaker and his Forest to cast a Fierce Empath. He goes and grabs a Woodland Bellower, putting it to hand, and passes turn. Nick plays a Forest and casts Farhaven Elf, passing as he searches for a basic. Max plays a Forest for his turn, and passes. Jameson drops a Swamp, and he casts Whispersilk Cloak before passing back to Joel. Joel taps his Forest, and he casts a Crop Rotation, sacrificing the very Forest that paid for the spell. He goes into his library and grabs a Gaia's Cradle, tapping it for 6 as it enters, plus 1 from the Mox for 7 mana. He then recasts his commander, Titania, and he brings back his Windswept Heath. Joel then loses another 1 from the Heath to go and find a Forest, and gains another elemental token. He also plays a Forest from his graveyard with the Excavator as his land for turn. Joel then drops Survival of the Fittest, and moves to combat. He swings all of his creatures but the Treespeaker at max for a total of 18 damage. He then passes. Nick draws for turn, and someone above him must be smiling. Oh wait, it's just me. That doesn't change the fact that he drew a very timely Damnation. Nick first plays an Overgrown Tomb, having it come in untapped, and he takes 2. Max uses this as a chance to crack his Myriad Landscape and goes to find 2 matching basics, while Nick drops Damnation. With the wipe on the stack, Joel taps his Treespeaker for 2 green and activates a Survival, discarding his Woodland Bellower. He finds a Dryad Arbor and puts it to hand, and then the board is wiped. Nick then casts his copy of Reanimate from hand, and he brings out Joel's Woodland Bellower, losing 6 life to the spell. He tutors for a non-legendary green creature that costs 3 or less as the Bellower hits the field, and he finds a Wood Elves, going to grab another card from his library, but this time it's a Forest. Max plays a forest and drops his Swiftfoot boots, and then a birthing pod, paying 2 life to help cast it. Jameson plays a swamp for turn and passes. Joel drops a Dryad Arbor and passes back to Nick. Nick plays a Rogue's Passage and he moves to combat. He swings the Bellower at its owner and Joel takes the 6. Nick then casts Greater Good in his second main phase, and Jameson uses Doomblade while the enchantment is on the stack to kill the Woodland Bellower. Nick then casts Gyrus, paying nothing into the X, and has the Hydra enter with 3 +1/+1 counters, and passes to Max. Max plays a Spire Garden as his land for turn, and he taps out to cast Vaevictus before passing. Jameson plays his Temple of the False God as his land for turn, and he brings out Skithiryx in his main phase. He immediately gives it haste, which is a bit of an odd ability for black, and he swings it at Joel, who takes 4 infect. Joel draws and plays a forest. He then passes, and at the end of turn, Nick sacrifices his commander to draw 3 cards and then discard 3. Nick plays a Ghost Quarters as land for turn, and then casts Skyshroud Claim to find 2 forests, putting them to the field untapped. He then pays 6 mana to cast his commander again, who this time comes in with 6 +1/+1 counters, and he then passes to Max. Max drops a forest for his turn, and he casts a promo version of Grave Titan. He equips the Swiftfoot boots to it before going to find his zombie tokens for the Titan entering. He then moves to combat and swings the Grave Titan at Jameson and Vaevictus at Nick. The Vaevictus trigger goes off first, and Mac blows up Gyrus, Survival, Skithiryx, and one of his own zombies. Nick sacrifices Gyrus to Greater Good, drawing 6 and then discarding 3. They then resolve the Vaevictus trigger. With nothing else, Max passes to Jameson. Jameson plays a swamp for his turn, and he casts Necromantic Selection in his first main phase. He wipes the board, and grabs the Grave Titan, gaining 2 zombies as it re-enters, and passes to Joel. Joel draws, and plays a forest. He casts a Findhorn Elves, and passes to Nick. Nick dredges life from the loam instead of drawing, and mills himself for 3 to return the sorcery to hand. He then casts the very spell he returned, and brings back his Polluted Delta, Canyon Slough, and Tranquil Thicket. Nick then plays the Delta, cracking it and taking 1 to go and find a Blood Crypt, taking another 2 to have it come in untapped. He then casts a Demon of Dark Schemes, and gives all creatures -2/-2 as it enters. It kills 4 creatures, and gives Nick 4 energy. Nick then uses the energy and pays 3 to bring back Joel's Woodland Bellower again, and goes to tutor for another creature. He grabs a Reclamation Sage, and as it enters, blows up Max's Birthing Pod. Max draws and plays Homeward Path, tapping it to get himself back his Grave Titan, and also tries to give back Joel his Woodland Bellower. Nick isn't a really generous fellow when it comes to it, and he sacrifices the Bellower to Greater Good, drawing 6 and discarding 3. One of the cards discarded is Anger, which is something I should note for the audience. Max then recasts Vaevictus for 8, and gears up the dragon with some Sweet Jordans. He swings the dragon at Jameson because Infect is scary, and the trigger lets Max blow up the Whisper Silk Cloak, the Cradle, Greater Good, and one of his own forests. Joel gets a forest back, while Max gets a Song of the Dryad, Jameson hits a spell, and Nyx gets a swamp. Max decides to put the aura onto the Demon of the Dark Schemes to prevent any more graveyard shenanigans, and passes to Jameson. Jameson draws and casts an Extraplanar Lens, exiling a swamp. He's sticking to the plan and recasts Skithiryx, giving it haste as it enters. And he hits Joel for another 4 infect, and passes. Joel draws and casts an Eternal Witness, bringing back his Fierce Empath, which he recasts. He goes to find a creature while Nick uses the time to cycle his Canyon Slough and Tranquil Thicket, drawing 2 cards. Joel reveals a Regal Force and puts it to hand before passing. Nick dredges his life from the loam again, and plays a Mountain. He then pays 8 mana to cast his commander, who comes in with 8 +1/+1 counters on it. Nick then drops a Bane of Progress, and blows up a good chunk of the artifacts as it enters, gaining it 5 +1/+1 counters. He swings everything at Joel because they all have haste from Anger, and Nick gets to exile a creature from his graveyard. He exiles Rakdos the Defiler, and has it go at Jameson. Joel takes 20, and Jameson then takes 7 and has to sacrifice half of his non-demon permanents, rounded up. At the end of combat, Rakdos is exiled forever, and Nick then passes. Max draws and cycles his copy of Tranquil Thicket. He casts Journey to Eternity and attaches it to his Grave Titan. Max then swings both a Titan and Vaevictus at Nick, and gets 2 zombie tokens from the Titan swinging. He has the Vaevictus trigger target the Grave Titan, one of Jameson's lands, the Eternal Witness, and Gyrus. With the Titan being sacrificed, the Journey transforms to become Atzal, Cave of Eternity, and returns the Grave Titan back to the field, giving Max 2 more tokens. Joel reveals a Crystal Vein, Nick hits a Sepulchral Primordial, Max hits a Badlands, while Jameson reveals Ingoruk's Wake. Nick only has 1 real opponent with creatures in the bin, and he brings back Joel's Eternal Witness. He returns Xenagos, God of Revels, to his hand as it enters, and then Nick takes a 6 from Vaevictus. Max then goes to a second main phase, casting Asceticism before passing to Jameson. Jameson draws Ingoruk's Wake, but with no real lands or mana, has to pass. Joel draws and cracks his Crystal Vein, giving himself 2 floating colorless, and has enough mana to cast a Regal Force. He draws 2 cards as the elemental enters, and he plays a Verdant Catacomb. Joel then cracks the Catacomb, taking 1 to find a forest, and with 1 floating mana left, still has enough to cast a Life's Legacy. He sacrifices the forest to draw 5 more cards, and then passes to Nick. Nick dredges his Golgari Grave Troll back to his hand, milling himself for 6. He then plays a Kessig Wolfrun as his land for turn, and he casts Xenagos. He pumps his Demon of the Dark Scheme with the Kessig Wolfrun for +5/+0, and he heads to combat. He then puts the Xenagos trigger onto the demon, and he swings it at Max to take him out, and the rest to Jameson. Jameson responds by regenerating his commander, and he blocks the Bane but still takes 15. Jameson does forget that Skithiryx has a regen shield for a minute, but he remembers shortly after. Jameson draws and swings Skittles the Dragon at Joel, solidifying his 2nd place. At this point, he and Joel are almost certainly dead to Nick, and after taking Joel out, Jameson casts Innocent Blood. Jameson sacrifices his commander, while Nick sacrifices something inconsequential. Nick untaps and has the game all but in the bag. He recasts his commander, and swinging everything at Jameson, wins through combat damage. Game review time. So, I think we had 3 strong showings, and 1 less so, but it was still effective in the end. I'm talking of course about Jameson's Skithiryx deck, which didn't really seem to do very much except for remove creatures and then kill Joel. I think a lot of this was due unfortunately to some dead draws, and then losing half of his permanents, i.e. most of his lands, after getting hit by Rakdos the Defiler. Max's Vaevictus deck has shown me once again why I think Vaevictus is probably the most interesting of all the dragons from M19. I know Arcades is the fan favorite, but when built correctly, Vaevictus' Chaos Warp can be very strong, and you can hit crazy amounts of permanents and creatures. If I didn't have Prosh, I would probably consider building him or the next commander, which is Gyrus. Nick's deck really went off, and being able to reanimate things like Rakdos without any of the downside and all of the upside makes me think a lot about Kalia. I don't think too long because I'm not a big fan of Mardu, and being able to do it in a Jund deck just makes my heart flutter. Nick was able to top deck a very timely Damnation, and it unfortunately had the benefit of dealing with everyone's boards and setting Joel really far behind. I think Joel illustrated how strong Titania can be early on, but also how fragile she can be should there be a board wipe and then denial and resource stealing afterwards. Having enough mana on turn 2 to cast a 5-drop commander is no joke, and he had a ton of power by turn 3. I do think this highlights the point that the Command Zone made where one player pulls out very far ahead, and all of a sudden, instead of everyone being on equal footing, all of a sudden everyone's ganging up on you. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.